And so when Anna got here, I was upstairs brushing my teeth. So I hollered down to her like, hey, I'll be right down. And so I came down and I was like, I think my water broke. Like, this is so weird to me. Like, I don't know where I am in this labor. This is crazy. And then I had the contraction as I was leaning against the counter in the in our kitchen. And she was like, LeAnne, you're having this baby soon. Like, you are in active labor. This baby is coming quick. And like, if you want to have this baby in the birth tub, we got to get that set up. And we need her assistant, who's a student midwife, who thankfully only lives like 30 minutes away. She called her, and the phrase that she used, I will never forget. She goes, Aura, who's a student midwife. She goes, Aura, this baby's coming. It's time to fly. And then all of a sudden for me, I was like, oh, this baby's coming. It's time to fly. Like, get your head in the right space, girls.
I'm Angela, and I'm a certified birth photographer, experienced doula, childbirth educator, and your host here on the MyMaine Birth podcast. This is a space where we share the real-life stories of families and their unique birth experiences in the beautiful state of Maine. From our state's biggest hospitals to birth center births and home births, every birth story deserves to be heard and celebrated. Whether you're a soon-to-be mom, a seasoned mother, or simply interested in the world of birth, these episodes are for you. Welcome to episode 1 of MyMaine Birth. Today's birth story guest is LeAnne, and she is here to share her home birth story of her youngest son, Fletcher, under the care of her midwives from Holly No.7 in Bangor. Hi, LeAnne. Welcome to MyMaine Birth.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
This is so fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So to start, will you share a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, so I live in Columbia, Maine, which is down east Washington County. We're about an hour east of Ellsworth and about an hour west of the Canadian border, so smack in the middle there. And we have 4 boys, my husband and I. My husband's a wildlife biologist, and that's what brought us out this way about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And we landed in Columbia, and he works out of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Office for the state headquarters in Jonesboro. So that's what brought us to Washington County. And we grew up in New Hampshire originally and came to Maine for college and never left and set our roots down and had, bought a house and 4 babies later. So here we are.
Wow, that's amazing. So now will you share a little bit about your pregnancy with Fletcher? When did you find out you were pregnant, and what were your thoughts in choosing your care?
He was our 4th baby, and we knew we wanted 4. That felt like a good number for our family. I think we got to 3 and we're like totally overwhelmed. And we were like, what's one more? That feels like we have this like missing spot, even though 3 was wild, that transition to 3 for our family. But we were super excited to get pregnant, and we chose to have a home birth with midwives that we had care with for my 2nd and 3rd pregnancies as well. So we were really familiar with them. And I've gotten to work with them as a doula on the professional side of things. So I have this just wonderful connection with Chris and Anna and Julie, the midwives at Holly No.7. So lucky. I mean, we're like a solid hour and 45 minutes from Bangor. So when we had our 3rd baby, who was also born after we moved to here, I was so relieved and so grateful that they would travel this far for us, because it's definitely a commitment, to get to somebody's birth within 2 hours. But so pregnancy wise, his pregnancy was really pretty typical. I had, the only thing when people because we had 3 boys. And so people would say like, is this one different? Do you think it's going to be a girl? I would say like, no, like everything's pretty much the same. The only exception was I had a lot of anxiety my first trimester. And it was something that really caught me off guard and took me like by surprise a lot. And I didn't realize how anxious like my level was, like my operating level of anxiety was, until I was really talking to my husband about it. And he was like, LeAnne, this isn't really normal. Like I was just couldn't sleep. My mind was racing about all sorts of things that I never usually worry about. So for me, like that was a really different experience, and also something that was like, it was really different. I think I'm kind of like a baseline. I'm more of an anxious person anyway. Like I don't like unpredictable changes. I that sort of predictability, like otherwise I feel anxious. And so feeling like that, my like mind was just racing all the time. It especially that first trimester, probably till like 16, 20 weeks. And then things got better. And I'm sure so much of it had to do with hormones and lots of other factors too. But that was really different for me and made me also really grateful for the relationship I had already established so well with my midwives, that they knew me really well. And it was something I felt like I could really talk to them about. And they had really great advice and suggestions. And then that just became something we have been monitoring in this postpartum time, because of course that's going to be another huge hormonal shift. And so we were just extra vigilant in talking and communicating with each other after that difficult first trimester, especially. But besides that, his pregnancy was totally normal and healthy. And it's funny, I had gestational diabetes with my second baby, and then I followed like the very strict diet with my third, and I didn't have it with him. And my second and third babies also only had 2 vessel cords, which is like a normal thing, but it's kind of funny that happened. And he had a 3 vessel cord. And so in terms of like physically, him and I were like, we were good. It was just that anxiety piece, which was really the only thing that really was surprising to me and difficult to wrestle with that first and like half of the second trimester.
Did you do any ultrasounds?
We did an initial ultrasound, I think around 8 or 9 weeks in that range. And then we did our 20-week ultrasound just to check on all his anatomy and all of that and make sure he was healthy. And then I had a biophysical profile scheduled for Monday, and he was born on Sunday. So I almost had a third one. We were close.
Wow. So now will you share, about how your labor started and about your birth?
Yeah. So he was born at 42 weeks and 1 day. So he hung on for a while. And historically, my pattern is kind of all over the place. My first son, who's almost 7, he was born at 42 weeks, and I had him in the hospital. And so he was an induction because he was just not coming on his own. And then my second son was right at 41 weeks. And my third son was right at 40 weeks. He was our due date baby. And so this is like a great lesson. And this is my former math teacher, nerd brain, saying like, you can't extrapolate data from only 3 points. Because for me, I was like, oh yeah, we're like trending in the right direction. They've all come a little bit earlier. They've all been a few ounces smaller each time. Like, we're golden. And then he was by far and away the largest baby and the latest one. So we really reversed the curve with him. But labor started, I had been having prodromal labor for like a week straight. And for me, that looked like pretty consistent contractions every morning for like from like 41 weeks on, from like 4 a.m. to like 10 a.m. And then they would just peter out and do nothing. And so on the Friday before I was 42 weeks, so 41 and 6 days, Anna, one of the midwives at the birth center, her and I made a plan, because if I get to 42 weeks, then I need to have a biophysical profile in order to stay in their care. That's part of their, just to make sure baby's got enough fluid, and mostly to check on the placenta and make sure it's still functioning as it should at that late in the game. So her and I made a plan that if I didn't go into labor over the weekend, I needed to go get an ultrasound on Monday. So that was our plan. But otherwise, she was her plan was to come to our house early Sunday morning and to start some of the natural induction methods, do some pumping, some herbs, and just to see if we could get labor kick-started. And so I woke up, so she lives in Bangor, so she's 2 hours from me. And so I had woken up Sunday morning like normal, having what I thought was prodromal labor. And Anna texted me around 5:30 and said, hey, I'm getting things ready to leave. Or, she's probably maybe an hour and a half. So it might have been a little before 5:30. And she said, I'm getting ready to leave and head your way. But if you are awake and having like prodromal contractions, just start pumping and follow the protocol that her and I talked about and just see what happens. So the protocol that she gave me was pumping with my electric pump, 10 minutes on one side, 10 minutes on the other, 10 minutes off, and then start over, 10 minutes and 10 minutes and then 10 minutes off. And so I was like, okay, here we go. So I dug out the old electric pump out of the bin, from my breastfeeding bin with all the stuff, and sat on my yoga exercise ball in our living room in the total dark house. All the other kids and my husband were still asleep. And I just thought, okay, here we go. Like, we got to do something here. And so I started pumping. It was around 5:30, maybe 5:45. And so I did one round of the protocol. So that was about 30 minutes. And during my 10-minute break, I had made cinnamon rolls the night before, like overnight ones. And I was just like very done being pregnant mentally and emotionally. Physically, I felt really fine. Like I wasn't swollen. Like I'm super lucky. Like I really did feel fine. I was hiking with my kids right up until the end and like carrying my toddler on my back. And it was just the mental, emotional aspects of still being pregnant. And, I just kind of became a hermit, and that was the way I dealt with it. I just stopped responding to texts and answering people's questions. And I just didn't want to talk about the fact I was still pregnant. But I told my husband the night before, like, I'm making cinnamon rolls because we're having a birthday party tomorrow. And like, I want cinnamon rolls there. So during that like 10-minute break of that pumping protocol, I took the cinnamon rolls out of the fridge. They could do their second proofing. And I was like, this is happening. We're doing this today. We're having this baby. So I started the second round of pumping. And so it was probably like 6:45 at this time. And my boys had gotten up and they're doing their morning thing, eating breakfast, starting to watch shows. And I'm sitting in this chair in our living room and my water breaks. And so I had noticed I definitely noticed the contractions while I was pumping that first time. And they were super weird. It was like 2 to 3 minutes apart. I started timing them because it was like a very weird pattern so 2 to 3 minutes apart for like 30 seconds. And which is a really weird pattern. Usually when your contractions are that close together, they're pretty long and they're very intense. And I was like, this pumping is making things so weird. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then my water broke sitting in this chair in our living room. And I was like, oh no, like we're really having this baby today. So, I think you get to that point. And for me, I got to that point in pregnancy where I was like, obviously this baby is coming. Like we are past time for this baby to come. And then it gets real. And I still wasn't prepared. Right. And it's funny. And, being a birth worker and seeing and supporting so many women and families, like at this point in pregnancy, like, yeah, of course I know 42 weeks is normal, right? Like in my rational brain, I know that, but my like emotional pregnant woman brain, I just couldn't rationalize that I was still pregnant. And then of course my water breaks and I'm like, oh yeah, no, now it's actually happening. Like this is for real. And so my water, it was kind of like a small break. It like definitely soaked through my sweatpants. There was no question. It wasn't pee for sure. Definitely it was a water break, but it wasn't like a giant gush. And so I kind of looked at my husband and I was like, I'm pretty sure my water just broke. And this was around 6:45. And Anna planned to get to our house at 7. And I knew she would be there shortly around that time. So I was like, I think we need to like get the house ready to have our baby. Like all of that stuff I planned to do in my like relaxing early labor, like get the sheets on the bed in the right order, get like the boys, because my mother-in-law was going to come pick up the older boys, get their like lunches packed for the day, like all that stuff. I was like, oh no, we got to do it now. So it was like 6:45 when my water broke. So we started picking, like getting changing the sheets on our bed, and my contractions got intense all of a sudden. So we were like changing the sheets on our bed. And every 2 minutes, I was like leaning over on the windowsill to have a contraction and then go back to putting the sheets on the bed. It was like a mad dash. So I was upstairs, like brushing my teeth. I was still in I had just rolled out of bed and hooked myself up to the pump. There was like no thought about actually like getting ready for the day. And so when Anna got here, I was upstairs brushing my teeth. And I hollered down to her like, hey, I'll be right down. And so I came down and I was like, I think my water broke. Like, this is so weird to me. Like, I don't know where I am in this labor. This is crazy. And then I had the contraction as I was leaning against the counter in our kitchen. And she was like, LeAnne, you're having this baby soon. Like, you are in active labor. This baby is coming quick. And like, if you want to have this baby in the birth tub, we got to get that set up. And we need her assistant, who's a student midwife, who thankfully only lives like 30 minutes away. She called her, and the phrase that she used, I will never forget. She goes, Aura, who's a student midwife. She goes, Aura, this baby's coming. It's time to fly. And then all of a sudden for me, I was like, oh, this baby's coming. It's time to fly. Like, get your head in the right space, girl. So I was like trying to pack, in between contractions. I was like putting food in the boys' lunch boxes to go with my mother-in-law. And like, it was so funny. But my contractions were still really close together. So my husband is getting the birth tub set up in our dining room area. And he's like running the hoses from the laundry room so he would go like hook one up. And I really needed him to do some counter pressure at this point because my contractions were really picking up quickly. And so he would get like, one of the hoses like halfway screwed on. And I was like, babe, I need you back here. And he would come running back to the kitchen to like do counter pressure and then run back to finish putting the hose on. And it was like, I'm sure it was like hilarious to watch the two of us. And in between contractions, I'm like, all right, what do the boys need for lunch today? And like, is your mom on the way? Like just like, yeah. And it was like those loose ends that I felt like I needed to tie up, right? Because like, just to like make sure the boys had an easy transition. And I had envisioned and planned things in my head a certain way. And now all of it had to happen in like 5 minutes. And it was crazy. So our photographer and my mother-in-law both got here around 7:45, and things were really picking up. Like that was the time where Steve was like running back and forth, and there was hot water boiling on the stove to make sure that the tub was warm enough. And they had every pot in the house filled up and boiling on the stove. It was actually this like really cool image. And thankfully both my midwife and her assistant, who's a student midwife in our area, were here. And so once the two of them were here, I was able to relax a lot. And so around 7:45, my mother-in-law got here and just got the boys right in the car essentially, and took them to her house, and she only lives like 30 minutes away. So that worked out great. And so while my husband was loading the boys up in the car, I was having a contraction and my midwife was squeezing my hips and my water broke. Big gush, like second time, all over the kitchen floor. And it was like one of those moments where it was like, okay, now we're really picking up intensity. And so he comes back in from putting the boys in the car, and now I'm stark naked and just like covered in fluid. And I was like, got really hot, of course, because my body was just working so hard. And that's really when like that peak transition labor hit once my water broke. And I threw up and I started to vocalize more. And that like major transition labor was definitely setting in. I was trying to wait as long as possible to get in the tub, because for me, that always feels like the best place to deliver. Like I've had two previous water births, and like that water is just so therapeutic for me. And so I tried to hold on as long as possible to make sure because that was my last strategy. My last comfort measure was getting in the water, and I wanted to make sure I really needed it. So thankfully they had the tub ready. And I remember that my midwife, Anna, saying like, the tub's ready whenever you want to get in. And I was like, I need a few more contractions. Like I need to be like really desperate and before I get in, because I wanted to make sure I didn't have to get back out and then back in. Like, even though like in my head, I knew like this baby's going to be here really soon, I wanted to make sure I was like the last straw. So 7:45 or like probably like 7:50-ish is when my water broke really big. And then I got in the tub around like 8:05, 8:10. And I had a few more really big contractions in the tub. And then I had this like few minutes rest in between. And then my body started to push. And so I was sitting in the tub, like reclined. So my like legs were out in front of me, and that felt good to get off my legs for sure, because they were definitely jello-y after all those contractions standing up. And my husband was sitting on a little stool right outside the tub, and so I was kind of leaned back onto his shoulders. And that was the position I had delivered our two previous babies in, and that felt good for me. I tried at first to be like on my hands and knees, and my legs just like were not interested in supporting me at that moment. So I just reclined right onto Steve. And so I started pushing around like 8:20, and right away I felt like something's different. Like I couldn't figure out what it was. I felt like my body was pushing so hard, and I had my eyes closed, and like through my sort of like birth fog, I remember this thought like crossing through that was like, I think this baby is sunny side up. Like, why am I pushed? Like my body is like, felt like so much harder than my previous births, where I really did experience that like fetal ejection reflex, where my body just took over and pushed my baby out. And I didn't really have to like add the extra oomph to those previous births. And for this one, I was like holding on to Steve's hands hard, like pushing so hard. And so I thought like, maybe he's like in a funky position. Like, why am I pushing so hard? And of course, the benefit of context of how big he was 10 pounds, 10 ounces. It makes sense that my body had to push really hard. And so that was like a huge variable. Like, but of course I didn't know that at the time. I just thought like, maybe he's in a funny position. Like it felt different, and it felt like I was working so hard. But so he started to crown really slowly. And then that contraction ended and he kind of slid back up. And all of that was really good, because that was very slow and very gentle on my body. And with the next contraction, his head was born. And then he started to do his little rotation. And with the next contraction, his shoulders came out, and Aura, the midwife, grabbed him out of the water and put him on my chest. And there he was, all 10 pounds, 10 ounces of him. And at the time, I did not realize how big he was, because of course he's on my chest. And so I'm like looking down, I just see the head view. But our photographer took this amazing picture of him from her perspective on my chest. And of course he's like rolls on rolls on rolls down his back. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's like a 10.5 pound baby, no question. So it was kind of this just like crazy moment once he was here, and he was perfect. He came out and he cried right away, and his color transitioned perfectly. And so that he was born at 8:28. So I was probably in active labor for like an hour and a half. And it was wild. It just was like intense from the beginning. And I just remember saying things like, I was like, I couldn't even believe what just happened. I think I was kind of like right on the edge of feeling a little out of control, and like I couldn't catch up with the contractions. And it wasn't, I think sometimes when people have really fast labors, the inclination is to say like, oh, that's awesome, you weren't in labor for long. But also like the intensity all has to happen. It's just shoved into a shorter time frame, So I mean, like a 6-hour labor seems like the ideal time for me. An hour and a half was a little short.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we didn't know he was a boy. And so, of course, I kind of assumed he was the whole pregnancy. We had 3 boys. We already have 3 boys. And so we checked right away to see if he was a boy. And I was like, it's a boy. Of course it is. Like, that wasn't like hugely surprised that he was a boy, but it felt like, our final little puzzle piece was here. And so it was, it was kind of wild. So he transitioned great, and he was born at 8:28, and my placenta was born at like 8:36. So it was not long afterwards. The placenta was born, and that went smoothly. I stayed in the tub for that. It was just nice to have everything in the water. And then when I stood up, I didn't feel so icky. And so my husband cut the cord after the placenta was born. Of course, it was ready for that. And then I got out of the tub and I felt really good. So we made our way. I went upstairs to our bedroom and we just got tucked in. And thankfully I had put the plastic sheets down on our bed earlier in the morning. And my midwives put the cinnamon rolls in the oven because that was all I wanted after he was born. And so, then we just snuggled in bed for a while, and it was an 8 cinnamon rolls, and couldn't believe that he was here. And it was still like early in the morning.
Wow, that's incredible. Did you have any tearing? And how's postpartum been going for you?
No, so thankfully I didn't tear. I mean, he had a very large head to match his very large body, but he came out really slow, and I'm really grateful for that, even though like the rest of his labor was like wild and fast. That was slow when it needed to be, and I appreciated that for sure. In terms of my physical recovery, it was really good, and what was really helpful was my husband was able to be home for the first 4 weeks, and so that made, especially with our older boys, that made a huge difference. And so I really was able to focus on just resting and recovering and nursing and bonding. Nursing was a little challenging at the beginning, I think, because he was very low for like, especially the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, got squeezed really good on the way out because he was so big. And so I think his like jaw muscles were just really tight from all of that. And so he just couldn't open his mouth very wide. And so when he would go to latch, it was really tight and pinchy. And so the first few days, my nipples got pretty beat up. And then it started to get better as he was able to like stretch and open his mouth a little more. And then my milk came in. And so then I was really engorged, and I am always like massive overproducer. And so we had to kind of wrestle with that. Like his tight latch on really full breast was really hard. So it started to get better. And then my milk came in and it got worse for a few days. And then like by like day 10, it was a lot better, but it was really just like, giving us time to figure all that out. And I was going to see like a cranial sacral therapist was one of my plans. If it didn't start to get better, I was going to start calling people in because it was definitely uncomfortable. But I could tell like he was able to open his mouth wider and wider each day, which made a big difference. But we were able to just focus on nursing and bonding those first 4 weeks. And he's 3 months old today. So we're finding our normal, slowly getting up more confidence to go do things, all 4 of us, so just me. And we have a wonderful little homeschool community here that's super supportive and also has really young kids. And so it's been an easy transition in that sense too, where I feel good about, just dropping my older son off and, he's in good hands to do things that I wasn't able to do those first couple months with all my whole crew. But yeah, we're getting back out there now. So it's been good. It's been good. And I think part of that has been that I really had low expectations for everybody. And our transition into 3 kids was really difficult especially when our middle kiddo had a really hard time. And so that really taught me to just have low expectations for everybody and not push and try and do things and expect things to be normal right away, because no one really knows what normal is, especially those first few months. And so I think being more patient with myself and our family dynamics, because they had changed so drastically, so quickly, has helped a lot. Just my own perspective and my own expectations, managing that for sure.
Awesome. Now you're also a birth and postpartum doula. Your company is Adventure Awaits Birth Services, and you're currently offering childbirth education classes at Holly No.7 Birth Center in Bangor. Can you tell me a little bit more about your doula work?
Yeah. So I started my career as a teacher, and I taught middle and high school special education for 10 years. And after my first son was born, it was really clear to me that I didn't have the mental and emotional energy to be both a good teacher and a good mom. I just felt like I couldn't do both. It was too much. And so when we moved to Columbia, I was able to leave my teaching job, hopefully retire from that career, and dive into birth work more. And so I became a certified doula in 2017 after my first son was born, and took on birth clients and postpartum clients during the summer and sometimes during the school year if it was really, really compelling. But that was just too stressful. But mostly during the summer, and sort of built up some clients in the Orono Old Town area, which was wonderful. And then when we moved, COVID hit. And then we had a baby, and then COVID is still a thing. And then we had another baby. And so I haven't done a whole lot of births down in this area, but I've been able to do a few, which has been really wonderful. And while we're in this little people phase of our life, I've been focusing a lot more on teaching classes, which is what I really love doing that too. And that allows me to not have to be on call, which is what is most difficult with little children, especially little ones who are still nursing. So I've sort of shifted from on-call life for probably the next year and teaching more scheduled things, which has been really nice. But I got into birth work really because I had an amazing doula who really opened my eyes to oh, this is a thing. I could do this, and I feel really passionate about this. And she was just really instrumental in helping guide us through our first birth, which was, like I said, an induction at the hospital, which was not something I expected. And the way she helped me shift my perspective and see things through that experience was really informative and inspirational for me. So I did my doula training with her. Her name is Evelyn. She's located in Brewer. And then, so I've just kind of done things slowly over the last few years in between having my own babies, which has been really fun. And I've recently gotten more into teaching classes. So I teach childbirth classes in Bangor at the birth center at Holly No.7. And that's been a super fun connection because I obviously have such a personal love for the midwives, and then I get to work with them professionally as well. And I've done some midwife assisting with them. So when they have births down this way, I am able to assist them with that, which has been really awesome. So I've kind of dabbled in those sorts of things, and we'll get back onto the on-call life because I do miss that a lot.
Yeah. So I'll link all of your information over in the show notes, and also the dates for your Holly No.7 childbirth education classes. Thank you so much, LeAnne, for taking the time to share your story today.
All right. Thank you.
Before you go, I just want to remind you, I have a ton of resources for pregnancy and birth. If you're pregnant, whether you're a first-time mom or if this is your 5th baby, I want you to check out the show notes because I have some free trainings and free downloads that you can sign up for, as well as the link to access My Labor of Love, a comprehensive, self-paced online childbirth education course. I created this course specifically for moms who don't want to be told what to do, regardless of where you're birthing or who you're birthing with. And I'd honestly love to teach you everything that I know so that you can prepare for an autonomous birth experience and prepare to step into your role as the leader of your birth journey. So click to the show notes, check out all of those links, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to DM me at MyMaine Birth over on Instagram.